The morning sun cast golden ribbons across the marble floors of Sterling Heart Institute, the most prestigious cardiac center on the West Coast. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the Pacific Ocean, while classical music drifted softly through speakers hidden within the walls. Everything about the place whispered luxury and excellence. From the Italian leather chairs in the waiting room to the fresh orchids that adorned every surface, Dr. Gabriel Sterling adjusted his platinum cufflinks as he reviewed the day's appointments on his tablet. At 35, he was considered one of the youngest and most brilliant cardiac surgeons in the country. His family's medical empire had given him every advantage, but Gabriel had earned his reputation through sheer talent and relentless dedication. With dark hair that caught the light and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing, he commanded respect in every room he entered. Gabriel's personal assistant, Mrs. Chen, knocked softly before entering his corner office. "Doctor, your next patient has arrived." Miss Violet Rose, 24 years old, referred by Dr. Martinez for cardiac evaluation. Gabriel glanced at the file without much interest. Another routine consultation, no doubt. He had seen thousands of patients over the years, each case blending into the next. His world was one of precision, protocol, and professional distance. Emotions were complications he couldn't afford in the operating room or the consultation chamber. "Send her in," he said, not looking up from his notes. The door opened with a whisper, and Gabriel sensed rather than saw someone enter. When he finally raised his eyes, his breath caught unexpectedly. Standing in his doorway was perhaps the most delicate woman he had ever seen. Violet Rose looked like her name suggested, soft and fragile, with auburn hair that fell in gentle waves past her shoulders, and eyes the color of spring violets. She wore a simple, cream-colored dress that seemed to float around her small frame, and she clutched a vintage handbag against her chest like a shield. What struck Gabriel most was her posture. She stood with her shoulders slightly hunched, as if trying to make herself invisible. Her eyes darted around the room but never quite met his, and there was a tremor in her hands that had nothing to do with any medical condition. "Miss Rose," Gabriel said, rising from his chair and gesturing toward the examination area. "Please, have a seat." Violet moved like a deer ready to bolt at the slightest sound. She perched on the edge of the examination table, her feet barely touching the floor. Gabriel noticed she kept her cardigan pulled tightly around herself despite the warm California sunshine streaming through the windows. "What brings you to see me today?" Gabriel asked, settling into his chair and opening her referral file. The information was sparse. Age 24, complaints of heart palpitations and chest tightness. No significant medical history. Violet's voice, when she finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. "My heart feels like it's racing all the time. Sometimes I can't catch my breath, especially when there are people around." Gabriel nodded, making notes. "Any family history of heart disease?" She shook her head, her fingers twisting the strap of her handbag. "My parents died when I was young. I don't know much about their medical history." Something in her tone made Gabriel look up. There was a depth of sadness in those violet eyes that spoke of more than just parental loss. He found himself studying her face, noting the way she seemed to retreat into herself whenever he looked directly at her. "I'd like to listen to your heart," Gabriel said, reaching for his stethoscope. "If you could just remove your cardigan," and Violet's reaction was immediate and startling. She shrank back against the examination table, her eyes wide with something. That looked like panic. I can't." Gabriel paused, his stethoscope halfway to his ears. In his years of practice, he had encountered anxious patients before, but this was different. This wasn't medical anxiety. This was something deeper, more primal. "Miss Rose," he said gently, setting the stethoscope aside. "Are you uncomfortable with the examination?" Violet's cheeks flushed a deep rose color. She looked down at her hands, which were now trembling visibly. I haven't ever." She struggled with the words, and Gabriel found himself leaning forward, drawn by her obvious distress. There was something about her vulnerability that touched a part of him he thought he had buried beneath years of professional detachment. "Take your time," he said softly. Violet took a shaky breath and finally met his eyes for the briefest moment. "I've never been touched by a man before, never been examined by a doctor, actually." This is the first time I've been to see anyone about my heart." Gabriel felt something shift inside his chest. The way she said it, with such innocent honesty, made his breath catch. "Never." She shook her head, her voice growing even quieter. "I know it sounds strange for someone my age. I've lived a very sheltered life. My Aunt Victoria raised me after my parents died, and she was very protective. I've spent most of my life taking care of her flower shop and avoiding situations where I might have to interact with strangers." Gabriel set his tablet aside completely now, giving her his full attention. There was something magnetic about her, a story about the way she seemed to exist in a world separate from everyone else. "What made you decide to come see me today?" "The episodes have been getting worse," Violet admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I might faint. My aunt finally insisted. I see someone, though she wanted to come with me. Told her I needed to try doing this alone." The courage it must have taken for her to walk into his office alone, Gabriel realized, was probably more than most people needed for much greater challenges. She was fighting a battle against her own fears and winning, one small step at a time. "It'd help if I explained everything I'm going to do before I do it," Gabriel asked. "And you can stop me at any time if you feel uncomfortable." Violet nodded slowly. "I think that might help." Gabriel moved his chair closer to the examination table, close enough that she could see the kindness in his eyes, but not so close as to overwhelm her. "First, I'm going to listen to your heart with my stethoscope. It will feel cool against your skin, but there's no pressure or discomfort. You can keep your dress on. I just need to place it near your collarbone," he demonstrated, with the stethoscope in the air, showing her exactly where he would place it. Violet watched his movements with the intensity of someone memorizing every detail. "Okay," she whispered. Gabriel approached slowly, giving her time to change her mind. When he gently placed the stethoscope against the fabric of her dress, just below her collarbone, Violet's entire body tensed. Her heart was indeed racing, beating so fast it was difficult to get an accurate reading. "Your heart is working very hard right now," Gabriel observed, removing the stethoscope. "But that's likely due to anxiety rather than any structural problem." Violet looked at him with surprise. "You don't think there's something wrong with my heart, physically?" "No. But emotional stress can cause very real physical symptoms." Gabriel pulled his chair even closer, his voice taking on a warmth that surprised even him. "Miss Rose, can I ask you something personal?" She nodded hesitantly. "Have you ever considered that your heart symptoms might be related to anxiety about being around other people?" Violet's eyes filled with tears. She tried desperately to blink away. "I've wondered about that, but I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to be different than I am." Gabriel felt an unexpected urge to comfort her, to somehow shield her from whatever had made her so afraid of human connection. "You don't need to be different. You just need to feel safe." Something in his tone made Violet look up at him fully. For the first time, their eyes met and held. And Gabriel felt as if he was seeing something rare and precious that had been hidden away from the world for too long. "I want to help you," he said, and the words carried more weight than any promise he had ever made to a patient. "Not just with your heart symptoms, but with feeling comfortable in your own skin." Violet's breath caught. "Why would you want to help me?" Gabriel found himself answering with an honesty that surprised them both. "'Cause something tells me that beneath all that fear is someone extraordinary who deserves to feel safe and valued." For a moment, neither of them spoke. It's the afternoon. Light shifted through the windows, casting new shadows across the room. Gabriel realized that in the space of 30 minutes, this shy flower shop girl had managed to crack something open inside him that he hadn't even known was closed. "Would you be willing to see me again?" he asked. "Not just as a patient, but as someone I'd like to help find her courage." Violet's answer was barely audible, but it changed everything. "Yes." 3 days had passed since Violet's first appointment, and Gabriel found himself thinking about her violet eyes and trembling hands more than any professional protocol would deem appropriate. He had arranged her follow-up for late afternoon, when the clinic would be quieter, hoping the reduced activity might help her feel more comfortable. When Mrs. Chen announced Violet's arrival, Gabriel felt an unfamiliar flutter of anticipation. This time when she entered his office, she managed a small smile before her gaze dropped to the floor. She wore a soft lavender sweater that brought out the color of her eyes, and Gabriel noticed she seemed slightly less fragile than before. "Have you been feeling?" Gabriel asked, gesturing for her to take a seat in one of the comfortable chairs by the window rather than the clinical examination table. The change in setting was deliberate, designed to feel more like a conversation than a medical appointment. The racing heart episodes have been a little better, Violet admitted, settling carefully into the chair. I've been practicing the breathing exercises you taught me. Gabriel smiled. That's wonderful progress. I'd like to try something different today, if you're willing. Violet's fingers tightened on her purse strap, but she nodded. I want to take you somewhere that might help with your anxiety, Gabriel said. There's a small garden on the hospital's top floor. It's usually empty this time of day, and I thought the fresh air might be good for both of us. The suggestion clearly surprised her. You want to leave your office? Sometimes the best medicine happens outside of clinical settings, Gabriel replied, standing and extending his hand toward her. Trust me. Violet stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Gabriel could see the internal battle playing out across her delicate features, fear warring with curiosity. Finally, with a courage that made his chest tighten with admiration, she placed her small hand in his. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through Gabriel's system. Her skin was soft and warm, and he could feel the slight tremor that seemed to be her constant companion. As they walked through the corridors, Gabriel noticed how Violet stayed close to his side, using his presence as a shield against the curious glances of staff and visitors. The rooftop garden was Gabriel's secret retreat, a place he came when the pressure of life and death decisions became too heavy. Flowering vines climbed trellises around the perimeter. Comfortable benches were scattered among beds of roses, lavender, and jasmine. The late afternoon sun painted everything in golden hues, and the distant sound of ocean waves provided a peaceful soundtrack. It's beautiful, Violet breathed, her anxiety seeming to melt away as she took in the natural surroundings. I had no idea this was here. Gabriel watched her face transform as she moved toward a bed of white roses, her fingers hovering just above the petals without quite touching them. You know about flowers, he observed. My aunt's shop specializes in rare varieties, Violet said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke about something familiar. These are David Austin roses, specifically the Winchester Cathedral variety. They're known for their intense fragrance and delicate petals. Gabriel found himself captivated by this glimpse of confidence. When Violet spoke about flowers, the entire demeanor changed. Her shoulders straightened, her voice grew clearer, and her eyes sparked with knowledge and passion. Tell me about your life at the flower shop, Gabriel said, settling onto a nearby bench and patting the space beside him. Violet hesitated only briefly before joining him, leaving careful space between them. I've worked there since I was 16. Aunt Victoria taught me everything about arranging, about understanding what different flowers mean, how to care for them. It's the only place I've ever felt truly comfortable. What's your favorite part? Gabriel asked, genuinely curious. The early mornings, Violet said, her voice growing dreamy. I arrive before we open when everything is quiet and peaceful. I water the plants, arrange new deliveries, create the bouquets for the day. There's something magical about working with beautiful things that bring joy to people. Gabriel studied her profile as she spoke. You create beauty for others, but what brings you joy? The question seemed to catch Violet off guard. She was quiet for so long that Gabriel thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I've never really thought about that. I've spent so much time trying not to be a burden, trying to stay invisible, that I forgot about wanting things for myself. Gabriel felt something crack open in his chest. You're not a burden, Violet. You're a gift that the world hasn't been allowed to unwrap yet. Violet turned to look at him fully, her violet eyes wide with surprise. I don't understand why you're being so kind to me. You're this successful, important doctor, and You're just what? Gabriel prompted gently. Nobody special. She finished quietly. Gabriel shifted slightly closer. Close enough that he could smell the faint scent of jasmine that seemed to follow her everywhere. Violet, can I tell you something? She nodded. In my world, I'm surrounded by people who want something from me. My family name, my connections, my money. I've become very good at keeping everyone at a distance because I learned early that most people have ulterior motives. Gabriel paused, gathering his thoughts. But you're different. You're genuine, in a way that's become rare. You have this light inside you that you've been hiding, and I find myself wanting to help you let it shine. Violet's breath caught. I don't know how to be any different than I am. You don't need to be different, Gabriel said softly. You just need to be yourself, but without the fear holding you back. As they sat in the garden, surrounded by the sweet scent of flowers and the golden glow of sunset, Gabriel began to share stories from his own life. Told her about the pressure of living up to the Sterling family legacy, about the loneliness that came with success, about how he had built walls around himself that were different from hers, but just as isolating. I've been thinking, Gabriel said as the sky began to darken with approaching evening. Would you allow me to visit your flower shop sometime? I'd like to see you in your element. Violet's eyes widened with panic. Oh no, I couldn't. Aunt Victoria would be so curious, and she'd ask so many questions. And I wouldn't know how to explain. Gabriel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently covered her hand with his. What if we kept it simple? I could stop by as a customer looking for flowers for my office. No explanations necessary. The warmth of his hand over hers seemed to calm Violet's racing thoughts. You would do that? I want to understand all the parts of who you are, Gabriel said honestly. It's the shy girl who's afraid of her own shadow, and the confident woman who creates beauty with flowers. I want to know both sides of Violet Rose. That evening, Gabriel found himself doing something he had never done before. Instead of heading home to his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, he sat in his car outside Violet's flower shop. Through the large windows, he could see warm lights spilling onto the sidewalk and glimpses of lush greenery inside. He imagined Violet there tomorrow morning, moving quietly among the flowers, creating beauty in her safe space. For the first time in years, Gabriel Sterling felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not in an operating room saving lives, not at a board meeting managing the family business, but sitting outside a small flower shop, thinking about a woman who had managed to touch his heart without even trying. The next morning, Gabriel stood outside Rose Petal's flower shop, adjusting his tie nervously. Through the window, he could see Violet arranging white lilies in a tall vase, her movements graceful and sure. This was her domain, and he was the nervous one now. A bell chimed softly as he pushed open the door. The shop was like stepping into a fairy tale, filled with the most beautiful flowers Gabriel had ever seen. The air was sweet with the mingled scents of roses, jasmine, and something he couldn't identify, but that reminded him of rain on summer grass. Violet looked up from her arrangement, and Gabriel watched her face cycle through surprise, panic, and then something that might have been pleasure. Gabriel, she breathed, and the sound of his name on her lips sent warmth spreading through his chest. Good morning, he said, suddenly feeling awkward in his expensive suit among all this natural beauty. I was hoping you might help me choose some flowers for my office. Before Violet could respond, an older woman emerged from the back room. Aunt Victoria was exactly what Gabriel had expected, small and bird-like with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that immediately assessed him from head to toe. Well, Victoria said, her tone carefully neutral. We don't usually have gentlemen in expensive suits shopping for flowers at 8 in the morning. Gabriel felt Violet's tension from across the room and realized that his presence here was putting her in an uncomfortable position. I have surgery scheduled later and wanted to brighten my office before then, he said smoothly. Ow! I was told this was the best flower shop in the city. Victoria's expression softened slightly. You're a doctor, cardiac surgeon, Gabriel confirmed something. Shifted in Victoria's demeanor, and Gabriel saw where Violet had learned to read people so carefully. The older woman was protective, but not unkind. Cautious, but not hostile. Violet is our expert on arrangements for professional spaces, Victoria said, shooting a meaningful look at her niece. She has a gift for knowing exactly what people need. Gabriel turned back to Violet, who was watching the interaction with barely concealed amazement. What would you recommend for someone who spends too much time in sterile environments? Violet moved toward him slowly, her confidence growing as she entered her area of expertise. Something that brings life and warmth, she said thoughtfully. Maybe white orchids for elegance, with some greenery for freshness, and just a touch of color. As Violet selected flowers and began creating an arrangement, Gabriel found himself mesmerized by the transformation in her. Her hands moved with sure, graceful movements. Her voice grew stronger as she explained her choices, and there was a quiet joy in her expression that took his breath away. Perfect, Gabriel said when she finished. And he wasn't just talking. About the flowers. As he paid for the arrangement, Gabriel caught Violet's eye. Thank you, he said quietly, for sharing this part of yourself with me. Violet's cheeks flushed pink, but she managed to hold his gaze. Thank you for wanting to see it. As Gabriel left the shop, he carried with him more than just beautiful flowers. He carried the image of Violet Rose in her element, confident and radiant. It's the growing certainty that he was falling for her in a way that would change everything. 2 weeks after Gabriel's visit to the flower shop, the relationship had settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Gabriel had started visiting Violet every few days, sometimes as a customer, sometimes simply walking her home after the shop closed. Each encounter revealed new layers of the woman beneath the shy exterior, and Gabriel found himself completely captivated this evening as golden light filtered through the shop windows. Gabriel arrived to find Violet alone, putting the finishing touches on an elaborate wedding bouquet. She looked up as the bell chimed, and the smile that spread across her face made his heart skip. It's beautiful, Gabriel said, approaching the counter where white roses and baby's breath created an ethereal cascade of blooms. The bride wanted something timeless, Violet explained, her fingers adjusting a trailing ribbon. She's been planning this wedding for 2 years. Gabriel watched her work, noting the way her entire being seemed to glow when she was creating something beautiful. Speaking of timeless, he said softly, would you have dinner with me tonight? Violet's hands stilled on the bouquet. Dinner, like at a restaurant. Actually, Gabriel said, understanding her hesitation, I was thinking somewhere more private. My place. I could cook for you. Suggestion clearly surprised her. You cook, Gabriel smiled. I'm full of hidden talents. What do you say? Violet bit her lower lip, a gesture Gabriel had come to recognize as her thinking through her fears. I've never been to a man's home before. I know, Gabriel said gently. I also know you're braver than you think you are. After a moment that felt like an eternity, Violet nodded. Okay. Gabriel's penthouse apartment overlooked the ocean, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the sunset, painting the water in shades of gold and coral. But when Violet stepped inside, Gabriel found himself seeing the space. Through her eyes, suddenly aware of how stark and impersonal it felt, despite its luxury. Wow, Violet breathed, moving toward the windows. It's like being suspended in the sky. Gabriel joined her at the window, standing close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her small frame. I spend so little time here that I sometimes forget how beautiful the view is. Violet turned to look at him. Where do you spend your time? Work mostly. Hospital, surgery, meetings. Gabriel paused. But lately, I find myself thinking about flower shops and violet eyes. Violet's breath caught, and Gabriel saw something shift in her expression. The fear was still there, but it was tempered now by something warmer, deeper. Can I ask you something, Violet? Said as Gabriel led her to the kitchen, where he had prepared ingredients for a simple pasta dinner. Anything. Why haven't you ever married? Aunt Victoria says. A successful, handsome doctor like you must have women lining up. Gabriel's hands paused as he reached for the wine. Honestly, because I've never met anyone who made me want to try until now. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and promise. Violet leaned against the kitchen island, watching Gabriel's sure movements as he prepared their meal. I've been thinking about what you said, Violet said quietly, about letting my light shine. Gabriel looked up from the pan where garlic was sizzling in olive oil. And I think I want to try. But I need you to be patient with me. Gabriel set down his wooden spoon and moved around the island to stand in front of her. Violet, I would wait forever for you to feel ready for anything. Something in his tone, in the absolute sincerity of his words, seemed to unlock something inside Violet. She reached up slowly, her fingers trembling slightly as they touched his cheek. I think I'm falling in love with you, she whispered. Gabriel's breath caught. Think. Ow. She corrected, her voice growing stronger. I know I'm falling in love. With you? Gabriel cupped her face gently in his hands, marveling at how perfect she felt against his palms. I know I'm already there. When their lips met, it was with a tenderness that made Violet's knees weak. Gabriel kissed her like she was something precious, something to be cherished, rather than conquered. When they broke apart, Violet's eyes were bright with tears of joy rather than fear. "I want to try," she said, her voice barely audible. "Being close to someone, being close to you." Gabriel's heart thundered in his chest. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, Violet reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. "Show me what it feels like to be loved." Gabriel led her to the living room, where soft light from the setting sun created an intimate glow. They settled on the plush sofa, and Gabriel pulled Violet close, letting her rest against his chest as they watched the sky deepen from gold to deep purple. "Tell me about your dreams," Gabriel murmured against her hair. Violet was quiet for a long moment. "I used to dream about having my own greenhouse," she said finally. "Somewhere I could grow rare flowers, maybe even develop new varieties. But it seemed too impossible, too big for someone like me." "It's not too big," Gabriel said firmly. "And you're not too small for your dreams." As the night deepened, they talked about everything and nothing. Gabriel shared his own dreams, the ones he had buried beneath family expectations and professional obligations. Violet told him about the children's books she wrote in secret. Stories about brave flowers who found the courage to bloom in unexpected places. "I want to read them," Gabriel said. "They're silly," Violet protested. "They're yours," Gabriel replied. "That makes them precious to me." Later, as they stood on the balcony looking out at the star-filled sky, Violet turned in Gabriel's arms and looked up at him with eyes that held no fear, only love and trust. "I want to stay," she said softly, "tonight with you." Gabriel searched her face, making sure she was certain. "Are you ready for that?" "I'm ready to try," Violet said. "I'm ready to stop being afraid of living." Gabriel's bedroom was softly lit by bedside lamps, creating a warm, safe atmosphere. As they stood beside his bed, Gabriel took Violet's hands. "In his, we go at your pace," he said softly. "Always," Violet nodded, then surprised them both by reaching up to begin unbuttoning his shirt. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her eyes held steady determination. "I want to know what it feels like," she whispered. "To be touched by someone who loves me." Gabriel's breath caught as her small hands explored the planes of his chest. Every touch was a revelation, every caress a gift freely given. When he began to undress her, it was with the reverence of someone unwrapping something infinitely precious. "You're beautiful," Gabriel murmured against her ear as they lay together, skin against skin for the first time. "So are you," Violet replied, her voice filled with wonder. Their lovemaking was gentle, patient, filled with whispered endearments and soft gasps of pleasure. Gabriel showed Violet worlds of sensation she had never imagined, while she gave him an intimacy so pure and trusting that it brought tears to his eyes. Afterward, as they lay entwined beneath soft sheets, Violet traced patterns on Gabriel's chest with her fingertip. "I never knew," she said softly. "Knew what?" "That I could feel so complete." Gabriel tightened his arms around her. "You complete me too." As dawn broke over the ocean, painting the sky in soft pastels, Gabriel woke to find Violet standing at the window, wearing his shirt and looking out at the sea. She looked like a poem come to life, ethereal and beautiful. "Good morning," he said softly. Violet turned, and Gabriel was struck by the transformation in her face. The constant shadow of fear was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that took his breath away. "Good morning," she replied, moving back to the bed and settling beside him. "Gabriel, yes. I want to open that greenhouse," she said. "And I want to publish my stories, and I want to try all the things I've been too afraid to try." Gabriel smiled, pulling her close. "Then we'll do all of that, together." Violet agreed, and when she kissed him, it tasted like promises and new beginnings. 6 months later, Gabriel stood in the doorway of Violet's new greenhouse, watching her tend 2 rows of exotic orchids and rare roses. She had bloomed like one of her own flowers, growing into the confident, radiant woman he had always known she could be. "Dr. Sterling," she called out, noticing him watching her. "Come see the new varieties." Gabriel moved through the greenhouse, marveling at the paradise she had created. "Show me," he said. Violet led him to a section where delicate purple flowers swayed gently in the filtered sunlight. "I named this one after you," she said shyly. Gabriel's grace. It's a hybrid I developed that thrives in difficult conditions, but produces the most beautiful blooms. Gabriel stared at the flowers, then at the woman who had given them his name. Violet, he said softly. She looked up at him. Peck. Tantal, pulling out a small velvet box. Will you marry me? Violet's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with happy tears. Yes, she breathed. Yes. As Gabriel slipped the ring onto her finger, surrounded by the flowers she had nurtured and the love they had cultivated. Together, he knew that this was just the beginning of their beautiful story. They had found in each other what they had each been searching for without knowing it.
Oh.
Two hearts that beat in perfect rhythm. Two souls that had learned to bloom together. The shy flower shop girl and the lonely surgeon had discovered that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the gentlest touch and grow into something magnificent when tended with patience, understanding, and endless devotion.